Hi, Leigh.
Hi, Fifi. I have very exciting news that I've been meaning to tell you mid-pod for weeks.
Go.
And I finally remembered at the key moment. So I think maybe in like our first or second episode, we were talking about North Carolina.
I imagine we were.
We were talking about North Carolina. We were talking about a Republican, and we were just like, I think we said something maybe slightly dismissive in terms of being like, oh, of course it's like that. It's North Carolina.
Okay, understood.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Then I got we got a message on Instagram from somebody from North Carolina saying, actually, there's some really exciting political things going on here, and like the tide is turning in terms of North Carolina. And I was like, absolutely.
Great.
I was like, I'm super aware of this. It's just that obviously like Fi's main knowledge of North Carolina is Nicholas Sparks.
Yes.
So when Fi thinks North Carolina, she's thinking Dear John. Like that's where her mind is. And then this listener said, I totally get that. I'm from the Nicholas Sparks town. That's where I live. So Fifi, we have a listener in the Nicholas Sparks town, and I'm so excited about it. How thrilling.
Amazing. I want to know many stories from them about what it's like when filming happened.
Yeah.
Like could one go to that town and like do like a walking tour?
Yeah. Dear listener, this podcast in many ways is thanks to Nicholas Sparks.
It really
because me and Fi lived together in lockdown, and one of the things we decided to do to save ourselves from the brink of madness during one of the many lockdowns was we decided we were going to watch all of the Nicholas Sparks films and Instagram live it.
Because we were those bitches and we were mentally unwell.
So we entertained our friends with like watching Nicholas Sparks. And let me tell you, some of those stories are batshit. Obviously we've got the hard hitters, we've got the classics, we've got Dear John, and we've got The Notebook. But then there's the back catalogue, the deep cut back catalogue, which is deeply more batshit. It takes us to an entirely more fever dreamy place.
There's like literally like a whole ghost narrative in one of them.
Anyway, we love to see it. I thought I'd just share that. I've been waiting to say that to you while we're recording for
so
literal
nice.
weeks. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's the origin story of Queer Gals Watch. This is Queer Gals Watch The West Wing.
Hey. Episode 15. Can you believe
15,
it?
I can't. I really can't. And Leigh, we are going into the recap of what I can only say is one of the greatest episodes of television I believe may have ever been made.
I believe I may have been in a poor mood when I was watching this episode. I feel like maybe given that was your emotional response, I may need to go back and rewatch it. Because I think I spent a lot of watching this episode being like, Josh on his shit.
I mean, yes.
It's a very Josh heavy episode.
It's a Josh heavy episode, but then like the team are on top form. Like the writers were like, what's the craziest shit that can happen? Okay, let's go. So
and I love that actually we've gone from a very issue-led episode to a much more character-driven episode, I feel.
The kind of the heaviness and the weight behind the previous episode and discussing capital punishment has been thrown by the wayside, Leigh, to make way for tomfoolery, rabble rousing. We're rousing rabbles.
The rousing of the rabbles.
Of rabbles. And of just, once again, you and I just going to be waxing lyrical about CJ Cregg. So, without further ado, Leigh, should we just jump straight into the episode recap?
Let's dive in.
So we are episode 15 of series 1 of The West Wing. The episode is called Celestial Navigation.
It's giving horoscope, and therefore it's giving lesbian.
It's giving Stockard Channing and her Ouija board. We start the episode with just the previously on, which normally I don't mention, but I decided to mention because this week's so weird. It's just like clips of the different characters saying their names and what their job is. Like, were the general public confused?
I wonder if this is the first of a series of episodes that are going to focus on each of the job roles, this being the Josh episode.
Okay, I could get that. Also,
Do you know what I mean?
Just a quick mention that Mandy not getting a look in on the previously on. Yeah.
No, I fear it's curtains. I fear it's very nearly curtains. She has been giving a series of less and less relevant storylines.
Yeah, it's brutal. They're just at this point, I think, just trying to get to the end of the first season and then find a reason to get rid. But we open on a lecture series. So we're in a big lecture hall and perhaps we're going to encounter some more hot co-eds for Josh to flirt with and bang.
Don't let him loose on the co-eds.
Don't. They must be safe from him. And Josh has been invited to kind of give a talk, an evening talk. But don't get too comfy in your seat with your notebook, Leigh, because Mendoza has been arrested. So we remember that Mendoza is the candidate to become a Supreme Court justice, which we kind of went over in the previous episode. Not the previous episode, I can't remember which episode it was. Mm-hmm. So he is still in the process of being being voted in.
Being confirmed. So what happens with Supreme Court justices is the president nominates them, and then there's a period of discussion in Congress about whether to confirm them or not. And then eventually in which Mendoza will be, as we saw when we had our Supreme Court, what even is the Supreme Court episode, mm-hmm. and we saw the questioning of Justice Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
There is an opportunity for the Senate Judiciary Committee to question Mendoza on his record, on his views on various things, also on his personal life, because obviously it's like a lifelong appointment, etc. And then eventually it will go to a vote in the Senate.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So he's in the process of that. But we found out that he has just been arrested in Connecticut. Horrifying news. And he's been arrested for drink driving, resisting arrest, and disorderly conduct. Not a great trio.
No.
Sam is on the phone to Josh, and Josh is like, but Mendoza doesn't drink.
Mm-hmm.
So do we think actually Mendoza perhaps has been withholding alcohol dependency from his vetting, or are we thinking police racism? Place your bets, ladies and gentlemen.
I was thinking police racism, but I was also wondering, is this a moment where Leo's story weaves back in? Was my thought process when I was initially watching the episode.
That was my instinct as well.
Because we've blatantly ignored the outing of Leo.
Yeah, it's just not been mentioned at all. So Josh is like, look, I'm in the middle of a thing, like, keep me posted. Hangs up on Sam, heads to stage and gets introduced. But helpfully, we get Josh's CV, and this is very interesting. So we find out that Josh worked as the manager for the Minority Whip, that he was the chief of staff for Congressman Brennan, and served as senior political director for Bartlett's campaign, and then he was made deputy chief of staff.
It's an impressive CV. I mean, I think it gives a sense of like how powerful of a man Josh is despite his shenanigans. Like, he's got an excellent CV.
Yeah, it seems like he's worked for like in a range of roles.
Yeah, and also it seems like he was clearly quite impassioned about Bartlett as a candidate to leave his job as chief of staff to a congressman to then say, I'm going to go and work on the Bartlett campaign.
Yeah. So we're gonna cut to the actual West Wing, and like CJ coming in like a freight train, trying to save the situation as per. So Sam Seaborn is kind of briefing her on what's happened with Mendoza. Sam's bet is that it is police racism and that he has been arrested for driving whilst being Hispanic.
Yeah,
which obviously is kind of like a terminology that I think is sort of the lighthearted term of saying like institutionalized racism.
Yeah,
within the police force.
Yeah.
CJ asks, does Toby know? Upon which Toby Ziegler enters the room and says, I stepped off of the edge of the world.
Which is just how I would like to enter a room to let people know that I've heard the horrifying news.
Like, how dare Toby get away with saying the most dramatic shit, but make it so chic?
I know. He's just so hot. Like, there's something about that man.
It's because he's so lesbian coded.
He's such black cat energy.
Yes.
Put him on the cast of I Kissed a Girl, please.
Give the British public what they want. Toby Ziegler.
Fiorenza would eat that up.
Yeah.
That's just a deep cut for our British listeners.
Yeah. So Leo kind of comes in and is like, okay, team, like, let's go. Tell me what's happening. Like, what's been going on with Mendoza. Kind of comes for Toby a bit because basically Toby has been put in charge by Bartlett of Mendoza during this period of time. Because
of his confirmation process.
Mendoza can't speak for himself during this time. He, like, basically Toby has to kind of be his spokesperson through this.
Yes.
A really responsible role that I think Toby is hating every second of. Leo says, I want my phone to ring every 15 minutes.
Such daddy energy from Leo.
Just fantastic. And he said,
I don't know why everyone is turning me on so much in this episode.
She's feeling frisky and free.
I think it's because we're not talking about the death penalty. I think that's why.
Do you know what? Fairly.
I'm just so thrilled to not be talking about the death penalty.
Also, this is a very silly episode in what I believe is to be a string of silly episodes. So Leo sends Toby and Sam on a gal pals road trip to the police station where Mendoza is being held to like get him released.
Crazy.
Obsessed with the idea of like a long car journey. Sam Seaborn behind the wheel, Toby Ziegler being like, well, I don't like that radio station.
What was the discussion about Sam driving? I just don't understand why Toby is not driving.
I don't think Toby can drive.
That is so specific and such a deep cut, but I love it. And it actually rings so true.
Yeah, I don't think Toby can drive. I think Toby is a passenger princess.
Much like myself.
Yeah, me too.
Listener, I do have a driving license, but I would much prefer my girlfriend chauffeur me everywhere I go.
I think that it's just safer that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've never gotten a ticket.
No, you are actually a very good driver. And not actually, you are a very good driver. I've been in the car with you many times. You've driven me in America, a very stressful place to drive. But like, I'm an anxious gal and I just prefer to navigate.
Yeah.
/ micromanage. And I love to be in charge of snacks.
You do. You do.
Like a packed lunch for the road. Like I'm bringing a cool box. Like there'll be a choice of drinks. There'll be some Tupperwares.
Also, you love to DJ.
I do love to DJ.
Wicca Wicca.
Oh, DJ Wicca Wicca? Sorry, just coming out with a lot of like from the archives. That
was a celebrity matchmaker reference, which we also referenced in last week's episode. I would encourage. It's a very fun light watch.
Pure escapism for the absolute like bonfire that is the global political situation right now. So let's go back to Josh holding court in this lecture. I think that at this point, I realized the format of this episode is going to be like Josh in this lecture and then us kind of like flashing back to like the previous week and what has led us to the point of Mendoza getting arrested. Really fun format.
Such a fun format. I would also just like to say very quickly, we had the titles coming up over this scene, and it's Story by Dee Dee Myers, who was the inspiration for CJ, which is extremely fun that she wrote the story for this episode.
Yeah, love it. Good for you, Dee Dee. So Josh is being like, oh, everything kind of went to shit this week on Monday. And then we...
It did take me a while to work out that we were flashing back and flashing forward.
Yeah.
But again, it may have just been me on a bad day.
Yeah. So we cut to CJ's office and CJ and Sam chatting to each other. And Carol, lovely Carol, hi Carol, one of CJ's EAs, being like, CJ, you have the dentist, so you won't be able to take that meeting at that time. Cue one of the most fantastic back and forths in this show so far, with CJ saying, I'm like, it's okay, I don't need to go. And he's like, what's the problem? She's like, I've just been having a little bit of pain. And he's like, oh, for how long? And she's like a month.
And then Sam turns to her in the campest line this man has ever come out with, which made me love him. I just love straight men more when they're not afraid to go camp. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he turns to her in complete earnestness and says, your teeth are the best friends you got, CJ. Take care of them. They'll take care of you. I was screaming. We've completely lost the plot. But also it tracks for me that Sam would be very hot on dental hygiene.
But he says, she just looks at him and then he just says, I'm nuts for dental hygiene.
It tracks.
And her response to that is, go away now. And I will say that him being nuts for dental hygiene is very Chris Traeger energy from Parks and Rec, subsequent character that he played. So I love it. Anyway, Carol trying to get CJ to go to the dentist is very much the energy of you saying to me, like, just go to the dentist, when I was like, oh, my wisdom tooth has basically been like, I've been taking like pain medication for it like for months, and you're like, just go and have it out. And I'm like, no, it'll go away.
No word of a lie. You know what does make me proud to be an American? At 16, getting fully knocked out, so I was unconscious and didn't know what was happening, and got all 4 of my wisdom teeth out. It was the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
It is a smart choice, because now I just have to spend extortionate amounts having mine removed when they inevitably like start growing and smashing into the rest of my teeth. I mean, you guys just take like kind of dental work generally much more seriously.
Yeah. My Seattle dentist is like so distressed that I'm now in the UK.
She would probably describe your teeth as being your best friends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wrote in the shared doc, I suspect that CJ will have to have a root canal or something and then won't be able to do her briefing. More on that later. So, time for Josh and Toby to deal with someone calling someone a racist. So, bit of conjecture here for Bonnie. We see Bonnie again, Sam's EA. Honestly, she looks so fit. It's unacceptable. She's in like
her outfits never miss.
She's in like a little grey, like mini skirt suit. But the skirt is almost like a tennis skirt style. It's almost like pleated. Anyway, she obviously works with Sam, but Toby's like walking through the office and he's like, get Bonnie and Ginger in on this, which means
where is Kathy?
She's fine. She's probably busy. But like, all I'm saying is there is an EA called Ginger and I need to know more.
I do need to know more about Ginger. Quite urgently. Also, I would just love more story from Bonnie because I'm obsessed with her.
Yeah, I'd like more screen time with Bonnie. So the drama is that Secretary O'Leary has called a congressman a racist. Love that from her. Probably correct. Lee's written something so unhinged in the shared document. You've just put...
This is when I finally realized that we were flashing back and forward. And I was like, oh, Josh is recounting the week for comedic effect. I only realized this at this point.
But because we're flashing backwards and forwards, we keep seeing him in like ensconced in this chair at this lecture, and Leigh has just written, this man spread from Josh is the most intense man spread I have ever seen. It's like he wants to see the audience to see a bullseye on his penis.
Am I wrong?
No, it is the widest spread I've ever seen.
It was crazy.
Like, he's at a lecture, like, sit up in your chair. Sit up, you're a grown man.
Be a gentleman.
You're being hosted. Have some respect. So what happens is kind of a snowball effect, which is, so Bartlett is signing a particular bill, which is all about the fact that they're making loads of new jobs in the education sector. It's this huge thing. There's loads of finance going into it. It's like a big tick next to the Bartlett administration. But Debbie O'Leary has called this congressman a racist. So as we go to take some questions after the bill signing, who raises their hand but sexy Danny, our flirtatious love interest for CJ. CJ not present because she's gone to her dental appointment. So there's no one to be like corralling the press.
Yeah.
So Danny immediately, instead of asking Jed about the education bill, asks about Debbie O'Leary and like really pushes Jed, and it just essentially snowballs. Bartlett gets egg on his face, and like the gang sans CJ, like, Jesus Christ, someone just stop him. Basically, there's multiple storylines overlapping in this episode, and I will try my best to untangle them and explain them in a sensible way. I said, Leigh, what is HUD or HUD? Debbie O'Leary works for HUD.
She is the secretary for the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Okay, thank you. So while we're flashing back and forth with the storylines, Josh, in what we'll call present day, is getting phone calls from Sam about how things are going with Mendoza. Josh also has a microphone on his tie, and they made like a bit at the start where it was like him having to clip it to his tie. And I was just so terrified through the whole episode that Josh was going to get caught with a hot mic.
I was convinced that's where we were going. I was absolutely convinced that he was going to get caught on the phone about Mendoza on a hot mic. I was convinced. I was like, we're being very cavalier about the taking on and putting off of this mic.
Yeah, and like answering phone calls like mid-lecture.
Answering a phone call on stage.
Yeah, and him being like, yeah, sorry, I've got to take this, like, I'm kind of a really big deal. And like, obviously he does need to take the phone call, but like the manner in which you take it could be better.
Crazy.
Let's flip back to road trip time. Essentially, Sam and Toby are on a lesbian road trip. There's a lot of bickering. Of course, they're lost.
Which makes it not a lesbian road trip.
That's true, actually.
Our road trips are much better
There
organized.
would be a route already planned.
We plan ahead.
Yeah.
If anything, we plan ahead.
They are lost because Sam said that he was using celestial navigation and following the North Star. And that is the most fabulous thing I've ever heard, and I won't hear an argument against that.
What are you, Lewis and Clark? Like, what are you trying to date Sacagawea? Like, please.
Yeah, like, I'm sorry, but like maps exist. Also, road signs.
It's really not that complicated, especially in America. Like, driving in America is so much more straightforward because you just do the highway till the exit you need to get off. And then everything's really clearly signposted because America was like city planned for cars in a way that Britain was not.
Exactly. Should we meet Debbie O'Leary?
Please. Also, I think it is like really interesting that they've made her the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development because, as we learned in our Women in Washington episode, the first Black female cabinet secretary was the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development. So I feel like we're playing on some history there.
That's really nice. So we meet Debbie O'Leary, and she is like mid screaming match with Leo, and like she's 100% doubling down. And he's like, look, like you're making the president look like an asshole. Like you have to apologize. And she's like, I'm not going to apologize to that guy. Like I meant what I said.
And I love that we're seeing like a woman who's high up in government enough to be like Leo's equal and like is seasoned enough politically to be Leo's equal. Because I feel like most of the women we know are like of the younger generation.
Yeah. Or like assistants to other characters. I would just like to take a moment for the actor who plays Debbie O'Leary, CCH Pounder. She is an icon and a legend of TV and film. And fun factly, she actually auditioned for the role of CJ.
Oh my God. So she's the actress that I read about in Aaron Sorkin's introduction to the series. Oh, interesting. I think that would have been phenomenal also, but it would have made CJ a very different character.
Very different character. But I love her because I know her very well because she's also in one of my other favorite American TV series, ER, where she plays Dr. Angela Hicks. Great character, there for the Clooney years, you know? And like very, like, again, playing like a very outspoken character that's like a real driving force in like narrative in ER. So yeah, I'm just obsessed. In general, great scene, no notes. And Leo gives her the advice because he's basically like, you should never have got into it with this congressman because you know he's an asshole.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, I wanted to prove a point. And Leo's like, never argue with drunks or fools. And I just think that that's great advice.
Never argue with drunks or fools from an alcoholic is incredible.
Yeah.
We love a self-aware king.
We do. And I called it. We do find out that CJ had emergency root canal. And I've just put in the shed doc, this is going to be comedy genius.
Alison Janney is a comedic genius, the likes of which we have not seen since Katharine Hepburn. And I never knew that an emergency root canal could make me fall in love.
She literally enters a scene and says, I have to cancel the briefing. And Josh is like, that's okay. We don't have to cancel the briefing. I'll do the briefing.
I've just read what you've written. It is unhinged.
That's what...
Why is it a Tiger King reference?
No, that's a line that Josh says. Okay, right, I'm getting to this. So CJ's got this mouthful of cotton wool. She can't do the press briefing. which they were going to use to like, again, throw more focus onto the education bill after the kind of nightmare moment about Debbie O'Leary and this congressman, and that kind of stealing the thunder. CJ's like, I can't do it. And Josh is like, that's fine, I'll do it. And she's like, basically, anyone but you, please, anyone but you. And he was like, no, I'm fine. And she was like, you're hostile. You're a hostile person. And he's like, I'm only hostile when people make me hostile, which is not a helpful comeback.
I'm so glad that CJ, our queen, is finally calling out Josh for being the hothead that he is.
And then basically Josh is like, well, there's nothing you can do about it. I'm going to do the briefing. And as he leaves Alice and Jani's office to stride off to go and do the press briefing, he just shouts to the corridor, hey there, cats and kittens. Here comes Josh Lyman with the 2 p.m. briefing.
Oh, wait, so Josh referenced Tiger King?
But like, what came first?
Hey there, cats and kittens.
Cool cats and kittens. So just in fact, the phrase, and maybe Americans will know, like, where's hey there, cats and kittens come from? Like, who owns the origin of that phrase? Get in touch, we need to know. Also, like, weirdly, when CJ's like, I can't do the briefing, Josh is like, don't worry, you've got a great body.
Yeah,
I don't understand.
That was wild. That was crazy.
I don't understand. So many things are happening in this episode. And then
Danny walks up to him and he calls him mi compadre. And then I wanted to throw up in my mouth again.
Look, what I'm going to say is Josh gets handed a slice of humble pie at this press briefing in a way that he desperately needs. He arrives and Danny is like, oh, hey, Josh, like, what's going on with CJ? Josh is like, oh, she had this dental thing. She can't do it. And Danny's like, oh, cool. Like, is Sam going to do it? Oh, like Toby. And Josh is like, no, I'm going to do it.
And I love that Danny is like, no, you can't. You can't do what CJ does.
He actually very clearly states like, no, you're not. You shouldn't do it. Like, I'm giving you some friendly advice in a very respectful way. Don't do this. To which Josh Lyman replies with the following. Let me tell you something, mi compadre. You guys have been coddled. I'm not your girlfriend. I'm not your camp counselor. And I'm not your 6th grade teacher you had a crush on. I'm a graduate of Harvard and Yale. And I believe my powers of debate can rise to meet the Socratic wonder that is the White House press corps.
What in the name of misogyny is that? You can't do CJ's job better than CJ, you dimwit.
But also, like, why are you saying this to a member of the White House press corps?
Crazy.
At which point, Danny literally looks at him, cracks a smile, and just goes, okie dokie.
Never has the phrase okie dokie been cooler.
Yeah. Josh then gets up at the lectern and starts trying to do the briefing. And obviously, all of the journalists are like, oh my God, it's not CJ. Like, we're going to ask all the questions that we're not allowed to ask normally because she'll shut us down. Which then proceeds to mean that Josh accidentally says that Bartlett has a secret plan to fight inflation. He does not. And it just keeps getting worse. And they just keep asking more questions about it. And there's nowhere for him to go. And then he makes a joke being like, yeah, sure. Yeah, we've got a secret plan to fight inflation. And they're like, cool, so we'll quote you on that. Meanwhile, Danny's just leant back in his chair with his arms crossed. I will briefly mention a cut back to the lecture because they like go on like a little like break during the lecture. And this is when Josh is going to make another call to Sam to see how things are going with Mendoza. But as he's like walking across the hallway of this, like where the lecture's being held, like a 21-year-old woman just like calls across the room to him, "You're great." And I was like, who are these young women? And isn't there like an attractive singer or actor that they could have a crush on? Like, why is it Josh Lyman?
I think, and I've been sitting on this for a while, I think it's because I think Josh is based on George Stephanopoulos.
Okay, yeah.
Because you know there was that whole episode of Friends where Rachel has a crush on George Stephanopoulos and they get his pizza.
Yes, and he lives in the building across from them.
Yeah,
and
yeah,
then
yeah.
he's like having a shower and they're like, drop the towel, George, drop the towel.
Yeah. Because he was White House communications director to Bill Clinton.
Right.
And everyone thought he was a little cutie patootie back in the day.
Right. But Josh Lyman's not hot. Should we check in with our road trip gang?
Please. I'm obsessed with Toby as a backseat driver.
It turns out that the North Star was in fact the Delta shuttle from LaGuardia, and that is so funny. we do finally stumble across the police station, and it's very small town police station. Like we're very like sleepy town. So my feelings that it's racially motivated are much stronger now. I think. Yeah. And Toby and Sam walk into this police station and then talk to Officer so-and-so. And Sam's like, look, I'm Sam Seaborn. Like, you need to listen to me. And this police officer's like, respectfully, like, who the fuck are you? Like, like, I don't know who you are. Sam Seaborn's like, I'm Sam Seaborn. I work for the president. And this police officer's like, I'm going to need you to stop wasting police time. I'm going to need you to like get out and stop like playing a prank on us. And actually, I feel like we're so used to seeing these characters like walking around and saying all these powerful things and like making all these big political moves. But you kind of forget that like anyone would like walk past them in the street and not notice them.
Yeah, they're not famous.
No.
Except for apparently Josh.
Weirdly, but only with women in their early 20s.
Yeah, I mean, like, it is fascinating. Is this the first time we've left DC as well?
I think so.
Like gone with the characters outside of DC.
Yeah. I'm going to flip back to the secret plan to fight inflation and this kind of press briefing that is just nosediving so spectacularly for Josh. In the shared document, just in all capitals, it's just a whole line of me just saying.
It feels like Josh's comeuppance in like such a big way because he thinks he's hot shit and he could do everyone else's jobs better than them. He is very much the actor in the cast that is like, I could play anyone's part.
Oh my God, Leigh,
he's so the actor in the cast that's giving the other actors notes. Yeah. And then this is the moment that he has to go on as one of the other characters and is like, oh, actually, I can't do what that person does.
Yeah, he's so the like member of the cast. It's like, well, the thing is actually like, I'm not going to take that note because the reason why I did that was because CJ actually made this choice that like I don't think was like kind of working. So I kind of had to like change my vibe. Anyway, I agree with you. Leigh's put in our shared doc that is Danny getting hotter. And actually, I agree that there's something about him coming for Josh in this press briefing which
is extremely exciting.
Yeah, it's very sexy.
Also, may I say, the look of disdain from Carol, CJ's assistant, as Josh is exiting the stage is truly phenomenal.
She holds open a door for him to leave, like, the press who are, like, baying for blood. And just the look is daggers. She is furious.
She's so upset.
Yeah, Carol's fucking pissed. And Donna then like scurries in to collect him. And she's like, I don't know if you know, but like, this is really bad. And he's like, no, we can save this. And she's like, no, this is really bad. And he says, Josh says, what should I do right now? And she just looks him dead in the eye and says, go into your office and come up with a secret plan to fight inflation.
And then we have the lovely moment of getting to see Donna and CJ in the same frame.
Yeah, which we don't often get to see them together. Yeah. And then this is undercut by CJ screaming down a corridor of the West Wing, Joshua, but with a mouthful of cotton wool. So it's just like, Joshua!
And then all he has to say in response is, I feel really bad about this.
Yeah.
Imagine if a woman screwed up to that level at work and all she had to say for herself was, I feel really bad about this. You'd be burned at the stake as a witch.
Yeah. Enter Toby Ziegler, who says, have you fallen on your head? Have you fallen down and hit your head hard on something? And that's just his opening line. Have you fallen on your head? Have you fallen down and hit your head on something hard? So good. Yeah, and then Josh is like, I feel really bad about this. And Toby just says, oh, well, I guess that's all that matters.
I'm obsessed. I've never loved Toby more.
At which point, CJ's just still like reeling. And she just looks at him and says, a secret plan to fight inflation?
It's comedy gold. It's the funniest thing I've ever watched. It's like so slapstick, but Alice and Johnny could serve it to me on a spoon.
Yeah, like I'm eating it up. Like you could imagine on set, they were like, cool. So like maybe we're thinking like a little bit something funny with your voice with the cotton wool. And she's like, no, leave it with me.
Say no more.
You know what? Bring me back. I'll
say less.
Yeah, I'll say less. So another flashback story we get is that Mendoza has gone against what he's supposed to do, and he's spoken to the press. So Bartlett and Leo are like pissed with Mendoza basically because he's spoken to the Chicago Tribune and said that basically the president was wrong to ask Debbie O'Leary to apologize to Congressman Wooden. Because
Mendoza's just like a rock chick. He's just rock and roll, you know?
He's so like Avril Lavigne. He's so like, I'm just a rock chick. I'm sorry, that's just a reference to an Avril Lavigne interview that she did where she just keeps calling herself a rock chick. And I think about it daily. So Mendoza went and spoke to the press, which he shouldn't do because actually he shouldn't be saying anything. Like Toby's supposed to be like his spokesperson. So that's kind of part of the reason why Mendoza is now got to come back to DC because he was off kind of doing some things and the president has kind of called him back to have a chat and basically be like, come on now. Like I've stood up for you and I've put you forward as my nominee. So we're going to need to like work together a bit more.
Yeah.
During that scene, Alison Janney keeps on saying president and weefed. And I do believe at this point she is just carrying the show.
How any of them kept a straight face, I will never know.
I would pay to see bloopers. We are, listener, I think going to do a bonus ep on the bonus features on our DVDs. So stay tuned for that. Fingers crossed that we'll have some outtakes. Anyway, so Leo is basically going to have this meeting with Mendoza and the president when Mendoza gets back to DC. And Josh is like, oh, we'll be there with you in spirit.
And Leo responds by saying, you're going to be there with me in every way imaginable, Josh.
And I just love the idea of like Leo being like, no, you fucked up.
Yeah.
And you're going to pay. We're going to give you grunt work. We're going to flash to the lecture again. And Josh takes a moment to talk about some of the other people who he works with. And he decides to shine a light. He's like, oh, there's some really important jobs in the West Wing that you know about, like this person, this person, this person. But there are also a lot of people that you don't know about. For example, Charlie. And then he like describes what Charlie does. And then we cut to Charlie earlier in the week.
Having some of the most delightful workplace banter the world has ever seen with a woman called Helen.
With a woman called Helen, who we never see. She's just on the phone.
She's just the like West Wing phone operator, I guess.
Yeah. She's like kind of maybe the internal switchboard operator. Would you like to be Helen or Charlie, Lee?
I would like to be Charlie, please.
Okay.
Good morning, Helen. It's Charlie.
Hey, babe. How was New Orleans?
The president did very well.
Have you been to sleep yet?
Since what?
Since yesterday.
Good one, Helen. We love to see it.
Just like some really like friendly banter. And
I'm unfortunately unable to handle Charlie having such respectful banter with Helen.
And actually what makes it more emotionally devastating for me is that he knows everyone's name.
Every single staff member who Charlie interacts with, especially the people in the like lower echelon of importance jobs, he knows every single one of their first names.
Yeah. And I think that's just fucking classy. He has great rapport with everyone. So the reason why he's calling Helen is to be put through to the president's residence for President Bartlett's wake up call. And he gets put through to the bedside phone. There's some grunting and things as Jed Bartlett reaches for the phone. Charlie, very sort of like perky and upbeat, says, "Good morning, Mr. President, it's Charlie." And Jed's response is just, "What could you possibly want right now?" So safe to say, not a morning person, President
Not
Bartlett.
a morning gal.
No. And there's this sort of like kind of back and forth with Charlie being like, it's time to get up now. And the president being like, I don't wanna. And then Charlie just says this one sentence that actually, like, I think is supposed to be a joke. But I was like, oh my God. He says, I need you to dig in now. It wasn't a nightmare and you are the president.
I think we've been sleeping on Charlie as a comedic genius.
Yeah. Charlie then is called to the room, to Bartlett's bedroom. And I guess maybe the kind of one of the in-house staff who's like got the breakfast tray and stuff is like, oh, I've been knocking on the door for ages and I can't hear him and like I can't hear the shower. Like I don't know whether or not to go in. And Charlie goes in, Bartlett still in bed. Like curtains drawn, has rolled over and gone back to sleep. And is like shakes the president. He's like, you've got to wake up. And Jed's like, you know that you're committing a federal crime. And he's just like really grumpy. And he's like, well, how did you know the first lady wasn't naked when you came in here? Come to think of it, where is my wife? To which Charlie just responds, Argentina.
Bartlett desperately needs everyone to know that he and Abby fuck.
He does. Maybe a bit too much does he need people to know. But yeah, obviously because of this, Jed is late to his briefing. And that means that Sam and Toby et al. Are all stuck with Sam talking about like different roads. And like perhaps because Mendoza is driving from wherever he's been to DC and has decided to take like a scenic tour with his family to go antiquing. Very fabulous. And Sam, to pass the time, is just like telling everyone the route that he thinks Mendoza's family will have taken.
He's just such a know-it-all. It's ridiculous. He's such the well-actually guy, you know?
He really is. And I'm with Toby when Toby just turns to him and says, there's really something quite freakish about you, you know?
And then Bartlett comes breezing in the campest entrance anyone has ever made and says, I'm tired, I'm cranky, and my wife's in Argentina. Let's get this over with.
It's just so stupid. And I really enjoyed this scene, which is basically Bartlett telling Josh that he's an absolute idiot. And like, why did you say I had a secret plan to fight inflation? Like, what are you doing? Why are you doing the press briefings? Like, that's a job. Like, Sam or Toby should be doing that. Why are you doing it? And Josh's response is just, well, they were mad at me for imposing discipline and calling them stupid. And I was like, honey, no. The White House journalists sound stupid.
Please. The White House press corps.
Yeah, please. And then Bartlett turns to CJ and just says, okay, before we go on, CJ, if blood is gushing from the head wound you just received from a stampede of herding bison, you'll do the press briefing.
I just love the professional respect that we're giving CJ in this episode, that like others cannot do her job to the level that she does, and she's really quite gifted.
And the thing is, it's because we have this swinging pendulum that is, we can put cotton wool in her mouth and we can make her say president and briefing over and over and over again. But then we can also swing back to the president of the United States being like, she is the most qualified person in this room to do that job. Do not think you can waltz in and do that job.
Yeah.
Love it. No notes.
No notes.
No notes.
And then we end with a stunning two-hander scene.
It's incredible. So we end scene in Connecticut. So we've kind of come back to the present day. We've stopped being in flashback now. So we are in the police station in Connecticut. Josh is still at his lecture, waiting for the phone call to find out that Sam and Toby have got Mendoza out of jail. Toby is taken back to the cell where Mendoza has been kept. And it is an unbelievably written scene. It starts out with an absolutely fantastic greeting, which is the police officer opening the door of the jail cell and Toby going, hello, Mr. Justice, how are you? And Mendoza just saying, incarcerated, Toby, how are you?
We also get the piece of information that there's absolutely no way that he was drunk driving because he's on a medication that means if he'd had a drop of alcohol, he would be dead, which is like just a stunning takedown of the police officer who's like, I still thought he was drinking.
Yeah, I thought that he was driving erratically. And Mendoza and Toby have this scene and Mendoza says, look, I refused a breathalyzer because like there was no legal requirement for me to do that. Like it's a civil right to be able to not take a breathalyzer. And he was like, they put me in handcuffs and they walked me away. And they did that in front of my wife and my 9-year-old son.
Yeah.
And Toby's like, look, there's some work for us to do here. But realistically, what we're going to do is we're going to just like take you out of here and we're going to pretend this never happened. And we're just going to smooth it over. And like credit to this character. And also the character, he's already had a long track record within law enforcement and also the judicial system, if I remember correctly. He's like, no, I'm going to take these guys and I'm going to have them for all they're worth. Yeah. And like, I'm going to go to court over this. Yeah. Because the only reason they pulled me over was because of the color of my skin and my ethnicity. Yeah. And that's how the system should work. And like, I'm going to get these guys. And Toby's like, look, no, like I'll go and I'll talk to them. And I love this line from Mendoza where he says, you can pull all the strings you want, Toby, but don't do it for me. And in the end, Toby has this kind of both actors just do such a good job. Toby says to him, like, is this the battle you want to have here in this jail in Connecticut? Or should we get you into the Supreme Court and let's address this like on a federal scale? And let's like look at the actual real change that you can have. If you do that, if you decide that you want to press charges, then you won't be on the Supreme Court. Like that's the end of this journey. Yeah. I just think it's this like really, again, this show is so good at putting arguments out there, which actually sometimes it's like there's no satisfying answer really. Because like I want Mendoza to be able to like feel a sense of vindication for the fact that he was wrongly arrested for no reason. And that happened in front of his child and his wife and the distress that would have caused to them as well. But also I know that like it's kind of a bitter pill to be offered the Supreme Court because like, well, I'll be able to make some change, but how much change can I make? And like right now I'm just angry. Yeah, it's just so interesting. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of Mendoza.
Agreed.
Because I did like him in the first episode.
I think he's a fascinating character.
But I feel like there's so much distance to go with him. But it ends up being that Toby and him walk out and the police officers are going to drive the three of them to a motel where Mendoza's wife and son are. And that the police officers are going to give like a personal apology to Mendoza's wife and son, which I think is quite classy given the circumstances. So we kind of finish that by Sam then calling Josh, who is still on stage at this lecture.
And he is taking this part of the call. He has not gone backstage. He's taking this part of the call on stage. Which feels crazy.
Like, still the legs are spread, and you're just like, I know it's all part of his like sexy boy persona, but it's giving very like part-time DJ. Like I work for a startup. Like it's very like bad first Hinge date. Like,
I have a SoundCloud. Let me send you the link.
Like being like, hey, sorry, like I'm just gonna stop talking to you about this like crazy mix I made the other day. Like I've actually got to take this phone call. It might be about a booking. Yeah. No, yeah, great. Okay, speak soon. Yeah. Bye. Like, get a grip. And that's literally the end of the episode, Leigh. I think I really raved about this episode so much, purely because of the road trip element. I love a road trip.
Loved it.
I mean, Crossroads is one of my favorite films of all time. Which is Sam Seaborn Brittany or is Toby Ziegler Brittany? That's the question.
Toby Ziegler is Brittany. There's not a doubt in my mind.
Yeah. And obviously the comedy gold of CJ having a root canal. Should we go to the rapid fires?
Rapid fires, let's go.
Okay. Best fashion, Leigh.
Just a moment for Bonnie because she never misses.
Yeah, she's looking hot. Just like a moment for her general fitness. Like I would be very flustered around Bonnie in a big way. I would like an honourable mensch for CJ. And she's wearing like a pale blue silk shirt and like a cream wide leg trouser. Obviously, all of that is completely overshadowed by the fact that her mouth is full of cotton wool and she's obviously saying "we" thing a lot. What could a British or Irish politician never get away with?
I'm tired, I'm cranky, and my wife's in Argentina. I think maybe just like referring to themselves as cranky in front of their staff.
Yeah. I wrote trying to be funny in any way, which is pretty brutal. I think actually a British politician could never get away with like a kind of like panel, like a night with lecture series.
No, there'd be some kind of gaffe.
Yeah, there'd be like someone would cut like that would be rabbles would be roused. I feel like in terms of our bingo card of like big ticket items, guns, abortion, free speech, religion, this week we also had a big contender with discussing systemic racism within the police system in the US. And I'm saying this as a white person, but I felt like it was handled well, considering that the show doesn't have a diverse lead cast.
Yeah, and we're also like, obviously, you know, there have been various moments in time where I don't want to make it seem like Black Lives Matter exists in isolation and therefore people only became aware of these issues in a post-Black Lives Matter world. But we are 20 years prior to Black Lives Matter at this point. Yeah. So I think I'm glad that this show is shining a light on this in the year 2000, because obviously it's been an issue for decades prior to Black Lives Matter.
And I think in a way, especially watching it in 2024, it makes you realize how desensitized in a way we'd become to this issue. And perhaps people in America had become to the issue because the shorthand of getting pulled over if you're a person of color by the police is like, you know, driving whilst, I think became kind of like this phrase that people go to make light of, rather than being like, well, the reason why.
I think the fact that a shorthand exists like driving while Hispanic shows that it was a named issue even amongst white privileged people in the year 2000. Yeah.
So it's like, well, you know, it's an issue. So like, why is it taking so long for any action to take place?
Yeah.
I think watching it back in 2024 and being like, well, if we were talking about this then,
why was nothing done?
Yeah. Why did it have to take a large scale political action
20 years later?
20 years later, I think. I really don't wish to change the tone from like something very worthy. But man, I feel like a man.
Come to think of it, where the hell is my wife?
Argentina. What's Stockard doing in Argentina?
It's such a struggle in life to locate one's wife. I mean, I think that often happened to my father, God rest him. Just being like, where is Jen?
I think I have two winners for Man, I Feel Like a Man. Obviously, the first being, well, they were just mad at me for imposing discipline and calling them stupid. And then obviously the pure majesty of Toby Ziegler with, have you fallen on your head? Have you fallen down and hit your head on something hard? And what, Leigh, was the moment that made you proudest to be an American?
CJ, if blood is gushing from the head wound you just received from a stampeding herd of bison, you'll do the press briefing.
Yeah. Just a moment of quiet reflection for CJ Cregg. Personally for me, mine was, I'm nuts for dental hygiene.
Yeah, I also feel like, you know, Bartlett's quote to CJ on the importance of her job, like it's invoking the frontier, it's invoking American westward expansion history. Like there's just so much.
It's very Oregon Trail, you know?
It's very Oregon Trail. It's very like, this land is your land, this land is my land. And the press briefing is CJ's.
We're so dumb sometimes. Just fucking shit. Well, I'm ready to learn something.
Yes, we touched briefly before on Alyssa Mastromonaco in our Women in the West Wing episode. And I actually did a deep dive into her book this week so that we can have a little chat about what even is a White House Deputy Chief of Staff.
I would love that.
Because famously, she used to do Josh's job, and this has been a kind of Josh-focused episode. So her New York Times bestseller, Who Thought This Was a Good Idea and Other Questions You Should Have Answers to When You Work in the White House, is what I've been leaning into this week. Basically, my headline from reading this book, Fiona, is that Alyssa Mastromonaco is like one of us. She's one of the gals. We would so be friends with her. It's like she was like our gal in the White House.
Okay.
In the Obama administration.
Yeah, so she's like on our wavelength.
She's so on our wavelength. She has a whole extended bit in this book about talking about her IBS and having an IBS attack in the Vatican when she's about to meet the Pope. No. And the fact that everyone she worked with was aware of her IBS. And therefore, when she went to her assistant and was like, here is the situation, the entire team like dropped everything to be like, we need to find this woman a bathroom.
That's true friendship. That's
true friendship.
But that's also true respect in the workplace, you know?
True respect. And I thought as a celiac, you would appreciate that particular interlude.
Yeah, as a sensitive girly.
But not to reduce what was once referred to as one of the most powerful and least famous people in Washington down to her IBS. But that kind of just shows that she's one of the girlies. But I will now go into how she's deeply capable and just an incredible political operative. She worked on the Kerry campaign. Well, she actually interned for Bernie Sanders.
Okay.
And then she worked on the John Kerry campaign. And when Kerry didn't win and all of the Kerry campaign staffers were therefore out of luck and out of a job.
Yeah.
Which is the tough thing about working on a campaign, which I'd never really thought about before.
I just never really thought about that before. And the fact that then it's just suddenly over, like what a come down.
Mm-hmm. A longtime work colleague got her an interview with this really exciting new senator called Barack Obama. And she says of the job interview with Obama, I didn't feel like I'd nailed it. Obama bid me farewell with a classic job interview move. We'll be in touch. But if nothing else, I felt confident in my personality. At worst, I am good but difficult, in parentheses, and a tad sensitive. And at best, I am assertive but laid back, resilient with a righteous sense of humor. Even if I don't manage to get people to like me, I can usually persuade them that I am competent and not too annoying. And that's how this story starts, with the humble goal of seeming competent and not too annoying. Like most women I know, I ultimately want to be likable and trustworthy, as well as glamorous, but it's important to take baby steps.
I love her.
I know, she's so cool, isn't she?
I'd love to go for like a drink with her.
Yeah. She also, in several passages in this book, is like, so I was at this like really intense situation. So I just like slammed a glass of Prosecco and then I did what needed to be done.
Okay. Yeah. No.
So I will be needing you to read this book. Also, listener, I would highly recommend. It was such an entertaining read. It was also just like a really informative read for like any woman in the workplace or any woman who's like, or any person who's like trying to carve out their space in professionally. It was just so fascinating. But a little bit about her kind of background before she was in politics. I graduated high school with 76 other kids. I was a good-ish student, but I was also a big fish in a small pond. My wardrobe consisted of flannels and Grateful Dead t-shirts. And my biggest accomplishment was surviving an impeachment as student body president. A lot of people ask me how a public school kid from upstate New York with no connections and no Ivy League acceptance letters ended up a few feet from the Oval Office, working as the youngest woman ever to be a deputy chief of staff for the President of the United States. Sometimes these people are being rude, like how could someone like you end up in a job like that? Sometimes they're genuinely curious. Sometimes they want to know so they can do it too. I want to write this book to try to answer the question for everyone, but especially the last group. The jerks are least important to me, but they can still eat it.
She's so fun.
She's so fun. Before she was deputy chief of staff, she was, which I think is a job that you would excel at, and I had never heard of before. She was the director of scheduling and advance.
Tell me more.
So for the Obama campaign in 2008, so she was in charge of all of the advance, like logistics planning.
Yeah, I love it. Mm-hmm.
And she basically, there was a storm coming in a really key state that Obama and McCain were campaigning in. And McCain had cancelled all of his events. And she was like, he's going to look like an old man. We need to go forward with our event. We don't mind some rain. You're going to look hardcore and like cool if you go forward with your outdoor event. So she says, Barack Obama was on TV being smacked in the face by sleet, so much worse than snow. Basically the worst case scenario. We watched in horror as the event drew to a close and Obama reached his hand to Reggie. As we were turning off the TV, my phone rang.
Oh, God.
Alyssa, it's Obama. Hi, I said with my head down on my desk, girding myself for the inevitable and deserved. The event looked awesome. You heard John McCain cancelled all his events, right? He looked like a total old man. Alyssa, what are you doing right now? I was not sure where he was going with this, but I knew it was somewhere bad. My desk? I replied cautiously. Must be nice. Click. And he hung up on her.
Oh my God.
She says, the choice to keep Chester on the schedule, my decision, was always going to result in some version of that conversation. But Obama does not hold a grudge. By the time we saw each other on election day, this would be the last thing on his mind. You should always be prepared to defend your choices, whether just to yourself, sometimes this is harder, or to your coworkers, your friends, or your family. The quickest way for people to lose confidence in your ability to ever make a decision is for you to pass the buck, shrug your shoulders, or otherwise wuss out. Learning how to become a decision maker and how to ultimately justify your choices can define who you are.
That's great advice.
It's such good advice.
Yeah.
She also provided a little bit more context for, remember we mentioned that she was the one who got a tampon dispenser installed in the West Wing?
Yes, I do remember that.
I just think this is really interesting considering that, like, obviously we see CJ, we see Donna, we see Bonnie, we see Kathy, we see Carol, all, I would say, they're all premenopausal women working in the White House, right?
Yeah, there are multiple characters in the show that we watch who would probably be people who menstruate. Yeah.
Exactly. So, and we think about, so she's Josh. So she's got the same workload as Josh has throughout the show, except for obviously like so much more because she actually did the job. And the way that she sums up the situation is, the bathroom situation in the West Wing is probably not what you would expect. Toilets do not exactly abound. For women, there was only one full restroom on the ground floor, plus a single toilet in the hall on the main floor and one on the third floor. You would often find yourself waiting in line, which it's crazy when someone has such a high-powered job that they would have to take up their day queuing for the toilet.
That's so weird.
She says, on top of this, there were no tampons. I didn't think this was a big deal when I started working in the West Wing in 2009, but it was a huge pain to get out of the White House once you were already on the grounds. There was no running across the street to CVS between meetings. To leave, you had to brave the lines of tourists stopping in the middle of the sidewalk to take photos, and to come back, you had to show your ID, input your special code, put your bags through the security scanner and go through the metal detector. Everyone was too busy to go through this in the middle of the day. The White House was also not a scene where you could just bum a tampon from your girlfriends. Though this is changing, there are not a ton of women working in the West Wing, and many of those who are have already gone through menopause. Not many people traveled with a stash of Tampax. Those of us who did still get our periods developed an understanding with one another and with our assistants that it was cool to go through someone else's bag or drawer in search of feminine hygiene products while she was out. Still, it was not uncommon to find yourself in a code red.
And while you're running a country.
Literally. While you're deputy chief of staff to the president of the United States, having to ask your assistant to go and search through your colleague's bag in search of tampons is just why is that having to take up mental space? It's just preventing you from doing your best possible job, surely.
Yeah, it's patriarchy because it's been, that building was built for men to work in.
Yeah,
so
fully.
That's never been a thought because that's not an experience that all men have. Not all men menstruate. So
yeah.
It makes total sense, but it's kind of insane, right? That she's talking about this isn't the 50s.
Yeah.
This isn't her being back after the war. This is her 10 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's wild. It's such recent history. It's just crazy. So when Obama got elected, she stayed on in her job as director of scheduling in advance. Mm-hmm. And then she says, I was promoted to deputy chief of staff for operations in January 2011. I got the promotion because Jim Messina decided to leave his position as deputy chief of staff to be the campaign manager for the 2012 re-election.
Right.
And in a matter of hours, I'd been offered the job and accepted it. It was a reach job, not a lateral move, but there was no question about whether I wanted to do it. I had very little time to prepare my questions for Jim and even less time to spend with him to ask them. I got about 15 minutes to interview him and figure out how I was going to do this. Fee's eyes are bulging. This being oversee all the goings on in the White House campus, serve as the acting chief of staff to the president whenever he traveled, manage presidential events and the hiring processes for the executive branch, screen nominees for cabinet positions, and coordinate among the Secret Service, the First Family, and the White House Military Office, including Air Force One and Marine One.
Cool.
15 minutes she gets to ask her predecessor about how to do that job. It's a huge job. It's crazy. At another point in the book, she talks about how like her hair went completely white doing this job. And she's like in her early 30s at this point. So like our age.
Yeah, like your hair would go white, wouldn't it?
Yeah. She says, of all the departments, I thought the White House Military Office would be the toughest nut to crack. It was complex, scary, and procedural, and there was no cheat sheet to understanding it. You meet the WHMO in a conference room in a part of the West Wing that you're not really supposed to talk about, and I would be seated with high-ranking military advisors and decorated generals. I was worried I was going to look like a complete amateur when I had my initial briefing with them. It was scheduled for my first week that I was Deputy Chief of Staff. Before my meeting, my assistant went through the WHMO binder and highlighted some things he thought seemed important. When I went through it, I was trying to absorb everything before the briefing so I would look totally in control. About an hour beforehand, I realized this was not going to happen. The binder looked like a prop in a serious movie based on a John Grisham novel. The binder was so big it didn't even fit in my bag. I re-strategized. I went through the binder and tabbed all the things that made the least sense to me. When I walked into the secret room you're not supposed to talk about, they had me set up at the head of the table and I was the only woman.
Yeah.
Everyone was wearing a uniform. I was in a Kate Spade outfit that may have involved a shirt with hearts on it. POTUS would have gotten a particular kick out of the fact that they either called me ma'am or deputy chief. Luckily, he wasn't there. They asked where I wanted to start. I opened up my crazy looking post-it commercial of a binder and began with the first question, which was about the helicopter replacement program. After they gave me answers, I had more questions. I think the meeting lasted 2 hours, but about 30 minutes I got into the groove. The questions kept coming and so did the answers. Before I knew it, I was understanding it all. There is no bigger compliment than being intellectually curious about what someone else spends his or her days doing. It turned out that not having all the answers did me no harm. The feedback I got was that the WHMO directors felt good about my leadership.
Oh.
I just think that is such a lesson in being like, I'm not walking into this meeting to be the expert.
No.
And being comfortable enough to walk into a meeting and say, I don't understand what you do.
Yeah.
Can you explain it to me?
Yeah, up until this point, it's actually been none of my business how you guys do your jobs. Like, that's particularly the reason why you have those jobs. So, like, let's sit and let's ask questions. And actually, for me, that is the most valuable type of leadership, is when you admit that you're like, I'm not the expert on this. I've hired you because you are the expert in this. My job is to glean information that's pertinent right now from you and then build a strategy. That's why I'm here. But the reason that the other people in the room are there is because they know the most about that thing.
Yeah.
Wow. I can't wait to read the book.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. What is also interesting is that when she left the White House, she says, the New York Times printed a story about the White House staff in which someone made an offhand comment about the scope of my job. Alyssa Mastromonaco, relatively young at 36, has managed Mr. Obama's logistical and travel arrangements since he first started running for president 6 years ago, and will remain as Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations, responsible for overseeing scheduling, personnel, and much more. No big deal, right? I went apeshit.
Yeah.
After all I'd been through that election cycle. I would lose
my absolute mind.
Whoever had talked to this reporter had characterized my job as basically a travel agent. I had always been sensitive about this idea that I only handled travel and logistics. I also felt that if someone had been describing what Jim Messina had done in my position, they would have said he ran the White House. I didn't want to blame my reaction on fatigue, but it didn't help. The press office had circulated the story to senior advisors, and as soon as I read it, I replied all with a very cutting, infuriated response. I thought it was totally warranted. After that, I let it go. I was fuming, but I didn't think it was a big deal. Sometimes you have to say what you want to say. I figured people would read my email. Maybe whoever said what they said to the Times would feel bad, and that would be enough. The next morning, I came in for the 7:30 senior advisors meeting, and Clay told me that POTUS wanted to see me. Walking into his office, I had no idea what he would want to talk to me about, but being called down to the office rarely meant anything bad. I wasn't nervous, so I just went in. "So," he said, "I hear you sent quite the email."
Oh no.
I was totally taken aback. How the hell did he know about the email? "It doesn't matter who came to talk to me," he said. He went on to say that I needed to realize the power of my words. I could not send emails like that because they, I am paraphrasing, freak people out. Developing self-awareness is a lifelong process. You don't wake up just one day and have all you need. So even though I'd spent the last few months demonstrating that what I was capable of and knew what I was doing, this was something of a revelation. When the President of the United States tells you your words are powerful, it can be pretty shocking. I honestly didn't think anyone would give a shit if I sent a snippy email.
God, it's so interesting.
I'm so fascinated by her whole approach to everything that she did as Deputy Chief of Staff. Like I said, I would really recommend the book. I think also it just like illuminates what that role is and the scope of that role, very little of which we see Josh doing. There is also some hilarious stories in the book about Obama. She says, "Obama also enjoyed gossiping about my dating life or lack thereof." And there's a story about him like coming up to her at a party and being like, "I've found someone for you." While he was president.
It's giving Stockard Channing being like, "He's a doctor, CJ."
Also, she talks about the fact that when he was elected as senator, she started referring to him obviously as like Senator Obama in front of his Senate colleagues. And he asked her if she was mad at him because she wasn't calling him Barack.
Oh, oh, I love him.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. There's also just like so much interesting information about like the first day when you get hold of the White House.
Ooh, yeah, I think that's the stuff I'd like to read about. Like, because that's that moment where suddenly you've got the keys to the palace, and you're like, I think I would just want to spend a day just like walking around, but you can't because you like immediately got to run the country. But like, you would be so intrigued to like learn about the building and like.
Yeah, she says when someone came in to teach us all about how to use timepiece. This is while the inauguration is going on. So she's not been able to go to the inauguration because she has to set up Obama's schedule for his first day in office.
Cool.
So they get the keys to the White House basically at noon. And then she needs to like schedule his whole day.
No big deal. No big deal.
When someone came in to teach us all how to use Timepiece, the software that allows you to make the White House schedule, I almost cried. It was impossible and we had to use it that day. Oof. The dress I was supposed to wear to the inaugural ball stayed in its bag in my office for 2 years. I never put it on and actually forgot it was there.
Oh, she didn't get to go to the party.
Yeah.
That's actually devastating. I know it's not about like getting to go to the party, but like in my mind, it's like that must have been a big moment to like see your colleagues and look each other in the eye and be like, we're here.
Yeah.
And like the idea of her like over her desk, like in the light of her desk lamp, like trying to do this schedules thing.
Yeah, there's also some really fascinating discussion that she has about like she left the White House, as most people kind of manage about 3 years working in the White House before they burn out. And she talks about leaving her role as Deputy Chief of Staff in the White House and then kind of having a moment of being like, my whole identity
was this job.
As a professional has been defined by one politician's career, basically. And I think that might be interesting for you to read as someone who's kind of thinking about career changes and things. The way that she talks about it is absolutely fascinating.
Like, who am I if I'm not doing this job for this person? Like, one, how do I perceive myself? But two, how is the industry perceiving me? Yeah. Because I'm so aligned with this particular politician because of the years I worked to him. Yeah.
She says, when you go from checking your BlackBerry 500 times a day, needing to be available and responsive 24/7, to being able to sleep until 8 a.m., wake up and have a leisurely breakfast and do whatever you want, it sounds awesome, but you also wonder why no one is calling you. Weren't you invaluable, irreplaceable? We are all replaceable. Life goes on, but that doesn't mean it feels good. To add insult to injury, about 2 months after I left, a reporter wrote a feature for Politico in which my becoming a contributing editor to Marie Claire was the lead. And she wasn't saying the development was part of an exciting trend in women's magazines covering more politics and international news. She quoted my press release about the job, where I said I appreciated Marie Claire's fashion editorial as well as coverage of global women's issues, before arguing that while these two aims should be mutually exclusive, for women in power, they can't be. In other words, anytime someone like me expresses interest in beautiful clothes or celebrities or whatever, or doesn't indicate that I have a multifaceted personality with a healthy balance between light, fun hobbies and intellectual, political and professional concerns, no, this reporter says, it means I've been squashed under the thumb of patriarchy. She was dismissing my choices as not being serious enough. But what is serious enough?
Damned if we do and damned if we don't sometimes.
Yeah. And I will close this little discussion of this book with just a very heartwarming moment with Barack Obama.
Please.
To ferry us through these dark moments.
These dark days that we're having.
So basically, Alyssa Mastromonaco rescued a cat after Hurricane Katrina. The cat's name is Shroomy.
Shroomy.
Yes, and someone who she'd left, Alyssa Mastromonaco had left her job at the White House at this point when Shroomy passed away. But she emailed Anita, who was still, her friend Anita, who was still working with Obama at the time, to let her know that Shroomy had left this mortal coil. Mm-hmm. And she says, about 30 minutes later, I got a call from a strange number on my phone. Ms. Mastromonaco, this is the Air Force One operator. We miss you up here. Are you available for a call from the president? Before I registered what was happening, I was on the phone with POTUS. I heard we lost Shroomy today, he said.
Oh my God.
There's a lot of sad faces up here on Air Force One right now. You should know, I'm pretty sure we saw his spirit up here over Denali.
Oh, Barack.
Yeah. The nation's first black president does not have time to call a 39-year-old woman to offer his condolences for the loss of her cat. I said something like, I really appreciate this call. I know this is awful. He's been around since the beginning, he replied.
Oh, Shroomy.
As I say, I would really, really recommend her book. She also has a podcast called Hysteria, which is very much about like what that Marie Claire quote was talking about. Because she talks about, I suppose, the kind of intersection between pop culture and politics, which I'm really excited to listen to, because just the way she comes across in this book, I love her take on things and her perspective.
Yeah, I think her general energy, I think, is really interesting. And I feel like actually the things that she's been criticized for, it seems like she's like very aware.
Yeah.
No, I'm very intrigued. What a great study, Seshly.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see. I mean, she's not ruled out a return to politics. She said if there's some female politicians that she's keeping her eye on, that if they were to ask her to be involved in their campaigns or their offices, if they were to run for anything big, that she would be tempted. But yeah, I would really, really recommend the book. I found it so fascinating and I found it so empowering. I mean, I suppose her main, obviously, like, I'm not going to go into politics. Her main goal, I think, was to encourage women who might want to go into politics. But she also has really interesting things to say about like her choice not to become a mother and the fact that she often gets asked kind of weird questions about that. She also like speaks a lot about, you know, the trade-off of having had this incredible career, but also how it was like quite a lonely time in her life.
Yeah.
And her decision to like not have a big wedding and just get married by a Supreme Court justice, which like wouldn't we all? Yeah. But yeah, no, I found the book absolutely fascinating, and I think it was it's made me, I think, look at Josh's character differently in a way.
Okay, right. Well,
I feel like
I'm excited to get my teeth into it. I'm really enjoying like doing deep dives onto like specific individuals.
Yeah, me too. I think it's really interesting because I think obviously with any kind of political office or any kind of political issue, I think individuals are really exciting because everyone brings their own unique personality to the office.
Yeah.
You know?
And I think it does help because you're like actually hearing about one particular person's experience of it sometimes really breaks open what that job really means.
Yeah.
Because suddenly you have like a human perspective on it. Someone being like, oh, you know, like my hair went white. And you're like, okay, like I understand even more so that like the capacity of stress and like worry and the weight of the importance of your job on your shoulders. Yeah, I'm just,
She also just talks about like the symptoms of burnout and the moment when she realized she needed to leave the deputy chief of staff role, where she basically got herself to the point where she was convinced that she had like a brain tumor. Because she was like forgetting things and she was basically diagnosed by the White House doctor with like exhaustion.
Wow.
And she was like not able to operate at her full capacity. And so she was like, well, yeah, now is when I have to leave. I can't do the job.
What a legend.
Yeah. No, absolutely phenomenal.
Well, I feel like my brain is full of knowledge and my heart is full of the fires of feminism. Should we just meet up and do this again next week?
Yeah, absolutely. And just like, we love you, Alyssa. You're an icon.
Yeah.
And a legend.
Future friend of the pod.
Future friend of the pod. Let's manifest it because I'm actually obsessed with her.
We love you so much. Okay, great. Well, next week, I can't believe it, but we'll be on to episode 16.
We are barreling through season 1.
I can't believe it. Yeah, time it is flying.
If you are still listening at this point in this madness, please tell your friends. It really helps. Rate and review and also check out our Patreon. We've got some fun bonus stuff if that's at all of interest.
Yeah. Hit us up on the old socials if you've got any stupid questions or there's anything that you'd love to share with Leigh and I vis-a-vis your knowledge of American politics or your niche knowledge of the West Wing. We love hearing from you guys.
Yeah, it's like one of my favorite bits is hearing from people. We've had some really lovely emails about people appreciating the podcast. So that just like means so much because this is just our weird little freaky passion project.
Yeah,
so
100%.
We really appreciate that people are enjoying it.
Okay, well, shall I see you next time then, Leigh?
See you next time.
God bless America.
God bless America.